which is they are trying to build a government and a plan for government in real time, and they still don't. He doesn't have a chancellor. So many of the big questions at the moment about what an Andy Burnham government will look like are unanswered. So what we're going to hear today is kind of big picture stuff about devolution, putting place before party, and kind of investing in mayors.
Usually when someone becomes Prime Minister, they've either just gone through a general election or they've just won a party leadership contest. Either of those things allows us to get to know them and their policies more or less before they enter Downing Street. Andy Burnham hasn't been through a general election campaign, and unless Al Khan suddenly decides to go on the march, he won't be tested in a leadership contest either. So how do we know what he wants to do in power? We'll find out a lot more in his economic speech today. You'll hear it at 11:30 on Times Radio. His words are going to be examined very closely indeed by Steve Swinford, the Times political editor, but remotely, because he wouldn't be allowed to ask any questions if he was there. We can speak to Steve now. Morning, Steve.
Good morning.
This is a bit of a piece with the rise of Burnham, isn't it? That he sort of gets to become the messiah figure who shows up, delivers his sort of ex-cathedra views on how to make Britain great again, and then moseys on away with no questions answered.
I think, look, it's all about control. So he wants to control the message. They're calling this a foundational speech that will set out his broad vision with no questions afterwards. And why are there no questions? Well, a couple of reasons. One, control, but also two, and this is being very candid, I don't think at this stage they necessarily have the answers. It's worth coming back to what we say repeatedly on this show, which is they are trying to build a government and a plan for government in real time, and they still don't. He doesn't have a chancellor. So many of the big questions at the moment about what an Andy Burnham government will look like are unanswered. So what we're going to hear today is kind of big picture stuff about devolution, putting place before party, and kind of investing in mayors and local authorities. And we've splashed a story today that they want mayors and local authorities to help all the needs, so to help get young people into work, which is all very well, but what it doesn't do is answer any of the fundamental questions about tax, about what he'd do on defence, nothing about that at all. So he wants to kind of transmit, but at the moment he doesn't want the scrutiny of the questions. That will come later, but it does mean we are in a surreal situation because he's going to be Prime Minister very shortly indeed.
Is it acceptable, Steve? Because 25,000 people have decided he's going to be Prime Minister. I, just as a citizen, would quite like a bit of cut and thrust, a bit of testing of positions. Is that on him that he's not willing for the scrutiny? Is it partially on us as journalists, because it would just be a parade of people saying, is Ed Miliband going to be chancellor, and him not answering the question, and maybe we won't be vastly further on even if we did have questions?
I think it's politically really difficult for him, and these calls will get louder, these questions around his mandate and his legitimacy. If there was a contest or even a potential challenger on the horizon, and there isn't, let's just be frank, he is going to be coronated, he will be Prime Minister. But if there was, then you'd at least it would kind of flush out some policy positions. But we're probably going to go into this knowing less about Andy Burnham than any Prime Minister that I can remember. There's been no agenda. There's been some stuff in the by-election, sure, but we really don't know much about what he wants to do with the country and how far beyond the manifesto that he wants to go. And if you are Nigel Farage and Reform UK, that's all you're going to say on repeat from this point in. You are going to say there needs to be an election, there needs to be an election, there needs to be an election. So that is one of the big questions that he faces. But look, the other thing that's worth bearing in mind is Prime Ministers only get one chance to make a first impression, right? And we saw with Keir Starmer how terribly wrong that can go. So Andy Burnham he'll recognise that, and he'll be thinking about how he can get out there with a positive message today to try to deliver a kind of broad vision. But in terms of the detail of what he's actually going to do, I don't think we're going to get anything on that, really.
Do you know how devolution makes us richer? Because if we put power in local authorities, to my mind, local authorities have at least the same chances of being incompetent, if not more so. They're less democratically elected because fewer people vote in the elections. Is it as straightforward as saying devolution makes us richer, goodbye?
I don't think it's I don't think it's kind of silver bullet, and I think one of the arguments we're going to hear from him today, which we splashed on Saturday, is a really interesting argument that, and undeniably this is true, like the economic failure of parts of the country means that people in the south end up paying more in tax, they end up getting less out of their public services, so it's disproportionate. So everybody pays because the regions don't do as well, and there is a logic to that, but that does not necessarily mean the solution is more devolution. But Andy Burnham is convinced it is. That's what he wants to do. Power close to place, but we'll just have to see how that plays out over time. The other thing to flag, Stig, is he's talking about 10 years. Now, I remember when Keir Starmer came into power, I remember Boris Johnson talking about 10 years in power. Everyone starts off by talking about a 10-year plan for national renewal, for change, and he is doing the same thing. He's talking about 10 years of Andy Burnham. That's this election coming, the one after, and a little bit after that. So, this is a long-term project. This devolution he's talking about is not going to happen immediately, and like you say, it may not necessarily be the kind of massive change he hopes it will be, but he needs it to be, because if they want to turn Labour's fortunes around, if they want people to get voting for Labour, they need to implement change quickly.
We've been doing this programme for 6 years in this station, Steve. This is the fifth Prime Minister. So 10 years looks fairly ambitious at this point.
Congratulations,
yeah. 5 in 6 years or 10 years of one. What one has actually happened, the other seems distinctly implausible. Just before you go, Christopher Harburn has registered to vote in the UK. He's the crypto billionaire who chucked 5 million quid at Nigel Farage. No questions asked, nothing to do with anything. So presumably if he's registered to vote in the UK, he can give more money to reform.
So yes, he's no longer an overseas voter on the electoral roll, and Labour was changing the law to cap the amount that overseas voters could give. They were going to cap it at about 100 grand. But this potentially changes that, and Reform, people I was talking to yesterday, are quite excited by it. We found him on the electoral roll at a farmhouse in Hampshire, and that would potentially clear the way for some very big donations. And look, why does this matter? It's because this cryptocurrency money that is flowing to Reform has the potential to change British politics. Traditional parties can't compete with the scale of it. This guy, Christopher Harburn, gave £9 million in a single donation. He has given £15 million in total. Ben Dello, another cryptocurrency donor who recently moved from Hong Kong back to the UK, has already given £4 million. These are truly game-changing sums of money, and traditional political donors just don't have those pockets. So it is really significant if he does start donating again, and we'll just have to see where it gets. But that's not to say there aren't, huge outstanding questions over that £5 million gift to Nigel Farage, and was that against the rules, which we'll be getting a kind of verdict on shortly, we think.
Yeah, I wonder what he wants in return. Don't worry,
who knows?
That's just a rhetorical question, Steve. You don't need to answer that. Good to speak to you.
Thank you.
And Steve Swinford, the Times political editor.
The Time Now is coming up.
What's going to happen today with the Times newsroom reporter Ollie Cole. Morning, Ollie.
Good morning.
So what's the point of today? I mean, this is a guy, I suppose, who won a by-election in Makerfield. Is this now the beginning of him setting out his position as the national leader?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things and two audiences to all of these things as we go through the next few weeks. One is the Parliamentary Labour Party. You have a man who has won a by-election and convinced everyone in the Parliamentary Labour Party that he's sort of the messiah who can possibly save Labour's electoral hopes. And so these next few weeks are going to be key in showing that actually he's got the policies, he's put the thought in, he's put the work in to not just be a very good mayor in Manchester over the last few years in their view, but also sort of prime ministerial material as well. So he's got that audience, but also the general public. We've got voters basically in Makerfield who have heard quite a lot from him in recent weeks, but the rest of us haven't heard a peep as to what he's going to do for the rest of the country. So he's got to walk a pretty tricky tightrope here, being popular obviously on the Labour Party benches from the right to the left of those, but also across the country when people know that they're not going to get a general election to vote him in. They know that they voted for a party in a manifesto. Know that they've judged the last 2 years to be pretty tough in terms of turning things around. Now, what's interesting about what is going to happen today is going to talk a lot about devolution. He's going to talk a lot about moving Whitehall finances to more local areas, and he's also going to pick up on some of the work that Keir Starmer's government has already done, with the Alan Milburn report and what's come known as NEAT. So he's got this sort of interesting place where he's coming down, where he's trying to pick up from where Starmer left off and not sort of trash entirely 2 years of government gone by, but also show that he's different enough that people can feel a little bit more positive about the future. Maybe not the Damascene conversion that you've had in your personality this morning, but a little bit more hopeful.
Does he have to try and sell the getting rid of the north-south divide in a way that doesn't penalise the South? Is that one thing he has to try and land today, do you think?
This is always going to be the difficult thing for him coming in, is that Labour won an incredible majority, but also a majority that covers every part of the United Kingdom. You've got, suddenly Labour MPs in rural areas, on, seafront towns where they've seen quite a lot of cuts to their budgets locally in recent years. You've now got inner city London MPs. You've got the Red Wall trying to be put back together. Scotland, Wales is struggling as well. So you've got quite a patchwork of priorities, and there are two options here. You either try and be a Prime Minister that essentially tries to appeal to everyone all at once, which is a bit what Boris Johnson tried to do as he was governing, because he built that sort of interesting coalition of taking the Red Wall from Labour but also having sort of traditional Tory heartlands. Or you have to really drill down on where you think your general election strategy is going to be next time around, and it's not going to take long until the people in the party figures, and the people around Andy Burnham in his new number 10 are going to realise that that general election isn't too far away before we're into another cycle of it, and he's got to make some difficult choices as to who feels better off and where they are and what that looks like. There's already some concern within the Parliamentary Labour Party among those southern MPs that there's going to be a lot about the north in the coming weeks, but not necessarily anything for them. So everyone's sort of putting their hand up and trying to get their slice of the pie.
Can I ask a dumb question? And you and Kate might both have a view on this. Why is it going to be the case that just by transferring powers to local authorities, the country will get governed better? Because my experience, certainly of some local authorities, is that they're rubbish. Go to the people of Birmingham and ask them if local authorities do a good job running their city. They'll say no, they don't. So why is it a panacea to say, oh, don't worry, Whitehall won't be looking after us anymore? You bunch of local politicians, some of which are quite bush or village very often. Why would they all of a sudden know how to run the country better than anyone else?
Well, I think that is actually a really interesting question in terms of what Andy Burnham does with this plan. If you look at quite a lot of it, not a lot of it's very new in terms of empowering local authorities and giving them more money. But the truth is, you've got local authorities that now, Kate and I did a lot of work with this a couple of years ago. They're sort of had their spending power slashed in real terms by about 20 to 30% across the country over the last few years. A lot of them are in real survival mode. They've got an inflated social care bill that they cannot afford. They have got SEN provisions that they cannot afford. We've got council tax going up across the board. You've got already this sort of remodelling of local authorities going on, which half of them aren't very happy about. And you've also got the fact, and this is the key thing I think for Andy Burnham as he goes forward and tries to put what he's going to dub Manchesterism into Whitehall, is that, you can give a lot of power to a lot of people locally, but Andy Burnham, remember, you're now not a local mayor, and not everyone is going to be Andy Burnham. You are going to set yourself up for a lot of fights between yourself and local leaders. He's pretty used to being on one end of those. He's going to find himself on the other end of those, and you've got now essentially a lot of decisions being made by local authorities where we've just seen Labour have been trounced in local elections. So you have got this massive change going on locally, electorally. You've got a lot of very difficult battles on the cards, and the reality is people are already pretty fed up with the local people around the table making decisions over their bins and their things that they don't think are up to scratch. So that is going to be a really, really difficult nut to crack, and this is he hasn't got long. He says he wants 10 years to turn this around. He's not actually going to have that when it comes to electoral tests. So the early wins on this is going to be really, really interesting.
Just finally, Ollie, we're on Miliband Watch a bit on this programme. I think I was trying to if I was going to do a graph of optimism about Miliband being the next chancellor, if optimism is the right word, certainty about Miliband being the next chancellor, I would say it started pretty high. Then it collapsed about a week or so ago, and everyone said, no, there's no way he's going to have Miliband as chancellor, no one will wear it. It just feels the last, 3 or 4 days that it's rising up again to the point where he now looks almost odds on to be chancellor. Is that how you read it?
I think the question that's sort of causing that mood is essentially, if not him, who else, right? Ed Miliband has been helping develop economic policy for Andy Burnham for a little bit of time. A lot of Ed Miliband's team have been rallying around and supporting Burnham, particularly in the Makerfield by-election. The official spokesperson for Andy Burnham used to work in Ed Miliband's office. And so you've got this idea of, the idea that Andy Burnham hasn't already chosen who might be in number 11 is weird. It would be strange if he'd not already made that call. We know that Shabana Mahmood doesn't want to move from the Home Office. Wes Streeting would probably be pretty pleased by some briefing over the weekend from civil servants that actually, or he talks like someone in the centre right, but actually he governs like someone in the left. Well, that's a pretty good thing for him, I would say, but that the rest of the party won't wear it. There's still this question that, some figures in number 10 are floating that you don't count out and rule out the possibility altogether of Pat McFadden going in. There is a bit of continuity early on, but that's going to be a choice that essentially Andy Burnham's got to make. How much does he look brand new and how much does he look a bit sort of continuity Starmer? So it looks quite likely, purely because there is no other answer to that question. But I think we are going to have that answer held pretty closely to Andy Burnham's chest for the next few weeks at least.
Yeah, we will see what happens. Ollie, great to speak to you. Thanks for joining us.